Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into two of the most potent economic metrics, GDP and PPP. We're going to break down what they mean, how they're calculated, and why they matter. Plus, we'll explore their pros, cons, and some real-life examples. So stick around whether you're an economics buff or just curious about how we measure a country's prosperity. Let's start talking about gross domestic product, or GDP for short. GDP is the total market value of all final goods and services produced within a country over a specific period, usually a year or a quarter. Imagine as the ultimate economic snapshot that shows how much an economy produces. The formula is GDP is equal to C plus I plus G plus bracket X take away M. C standing for consumption, I for investment, G government spending, and X take away M is the net exports. There are three main ways to calculate GDP. The expenditure approach, which adds up all of the spending by households, businesses, and the government. And the income approach, which shows all the incomes earned, and also the production approach, which looks at the value added at each production stage. Ideally, they all converge to the same number, but sometimes due to statistical challenges, you might see slight differences. For example, the Bureau of Economic Analysis regularly updates GDP figures in the United States, giving us insight into whether the economy is steadily growing or facing challenges. But remember, while GDP is a key indicator, it doesn't tell us everything about a country's prosperity. Now let's talk about Purchasing Power Parity, PPP. Purchasing Power Parity, or PPP, adjusts GDP figures to account for differences in price levels across countries. Think of PPP as a tool that answers the question, how much can you buy in a country with a given amount of money? A famous example of PPP in action is the Big Mac Index. If a Big Mac costs $8 in the US, still, the equivalent of $7.50 in another country when using market exchange rates, then PPP tell us that after adjusting for local prices, the other country's currency might be overvalued relative to the dollar. PPP is beneficial when comparing economies with very different cost of living levels. For instance, even if India's normal GDP per capita looks low, when you adjust it for PPP, the picture changes because the price of many goods and services are lower. So nominal versus PPP adjusted GDP. Nominal GDP is calculated using market current prices and exchange rate. It tells you the total production value as reported, but it doesn't account for differences in local prices, which is what PPP comes in for. By converting GDP into international dollars, PPP gives us a better idea of the actual volume of goods and services produced and the absolute living standards. For example, while the US might boast a higher nominal GDP than China, once you adjust using PPP, you might find that China's economy is in some years even 20% larger. This is because everyday services and non-traded goods are generally cheaper in China. However, PPP isn't perfect either. It faces challenges like differences in consumption patterns and less frequent data collection. But overall, it's a crucial tool for international comparisons. So let's weigh some benefits and drawbacks of these metrics. So GDP advantages include provides a broader indicator of economic activity, helps track trend in production, consumption, and investment, and is useful for policy and financial market analysis. But there are some limitations, which include ignoring non-market activities like housework, it doesn't capture environmental or social costs, and fails to address income inequality. Regarding PPP, its significant advantage is that it levels the playing field, making cross-country comparisons more realistic by adjusting for local prices. But remember, PPP calculations depend heavily on the choice of goods in the basket, and can sometimes be less up-to-date than nominal data. So while GDP and PPP are invaluable, they don't capture everything, especially regarding quality of life, health, and environmental sustainability. That's why alternative indicators like the Human Development Index, Genuine Progress Indicator, and Inclusive Wealth are emerging as essential supplements. Let's put these ideas into perspective. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many governments noted a sharp contraction in GDP, yet increased government spending on welfare, and healthcare. which helped support citizens, an effect that GDP figures just doesn't fully capture. In emerging economies, large informal sectors often mean that official GDP figures underestimate actual economic activity. In developed countries, while consumer spending drives GDP, high household debt or income inequality might reveal hidden challenges. These insights remind us that while GDP and PPP are essential for understanding economic performance, they are part of the bigger picture. For a comprehensive view, we need to consider a range of indicators that capture social well-being, sustainability, and equitable growth. To sum up, GDP tells us the scale of economic activity, and PPP adjusts that scale to reflect the actual purchasing power across countries. But neither measure alone is enough. They're like two pieces of a puzzle, each providing vital insights into economic performance and living standards. For instance, while GDP might rise due to increased production, it doesn't show whether that growth improves people's lives or harms the environment. That's why innovative measures like inclusive wealth, which factor in natural and human capital, are gaining attention. Ultimately, we must look beyond the numbers to understand an economic well-being. We need a balanced approach that considers economic output, quality of life, environmental sustainability, and fairness in income distribution. Thank you for joining me in this deep dive into GDP and PPP. We explored how these metrics are calculated, why they're crucial for economic comparisons, and their limitations. We also discussed how alternative measures can complement these traditional metrics to give us a fuller picture of national well-being. So if you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you have any questions for future topics, drop them in the comments below. Until next time, keep learning and stay curious about the world of economics. Thank you!